Welcome to this special episode of the Citi Institute Podcast series.
What is Agentic AI for your organization? How are you able to identify it? Do you have an inventory that can capture Agentic AI systems and associated information? From a use case perspective, everything looks like an Agentic AI use case. So you need to be sure that the Agentic AI approach is the right approach for the use case at hand.
We're going to dive into Agentic AI, the do-it-for-me economy, with our special guest, Dr. Prag Sharma. Prag is head of our AI Center of Excellence, which he runs out of Dublin. Prag, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Ronit.
Let's define the terms. We've all heard about generative AI for the last couple of years. I think we know what AI means, but let's hear it from the expert. What does it mean? What is AI, and specifically define agentic AI for us?
Yeah, in one sense, that's a very difficult question to start with. As you know yourself, artificial intelligence itself is difficult to define because it is an amalgamation of many different areas of study, research, and applications, and so on. And then we come up with generative AI, which is an interesting subsection of AI where the language models are specifically focused on generating new content. And now we have another term called agentic AI, which again is in the same ballpark but slightly different. So let's talk about agentic AI. I think the simplest way to define it is to look at large language models or generative AI, artificial intelligence techniques that generate content plus take action. I think it's that amalgamation, like you said, it's taking what the language models produce plus giving them the capability or the ability to take action on those outcomes, and hence the name agents or agentic AI.
So generative AI is AI that shows us things, words, pictures, videos. Agentic AI is AI that puts it into action, that does it for us. So where does it make sense? Where does agentic AI make sense in finance and the economy, and where does it not make sense? Let's dig into that, Prag.
Yeah, I mean, clearly for large financial institutions and many organizations across the globe, consuming information is just one aspect of the work we do. So large language models were very good at taking that information, consolidating it together, and giving it to an end user, a person to consume it. But actually, we know that consuming is just one part of a process or an activity we do. The other is to take action on that information that a human has just been presented to. So with that respect, agentic AI opens up even more use cases. So if you can think of large language models as doing a particular task for you, which is summarizing content, translating content, extracting right amounts of information from huge corpus of data, the agentic AI system is now taking away that specific task and completing it from an end-to-end perspective. So it is moving from a task to a process-oriented approach. And in large organizations like ourselves, we have many processes across the globe. We have many functions that have processes, and these processes have many steps. So agentic AI is ideal to replicate some of these processes that have multiple steps that you can then put these tools between those steps and look at a final outcome that a human could probably then review.
So anything that's repetitive, that's a workflow-based process, and obviously all call it white-collar organizations such as ourselves or most of our clients, we have lots of processes that we usually do with a combination of people and software. That over time is going to get changed. Now, where's the boundary or the borderline? Obviously, the science is going to change dramatically in the next couple of years, but where is agentic AI not useful? Because let's draw some sort of boundaries as to say, for the foreseeable future, these are areas in finance or the economy where agentic AI is probably not the best use.
Yeah. So before I dive into what's not useful, you made a very good point, and you used the word workflow. To many people listening, they've always been dealing with workflows and automating workflows. So we're back to the question then, what is agentic AI bringing to the fore that's different from workflows? We have workflows. You can write code today that combines a number of steps together and you produce an outcome. You could take a complex reporting task where you have to take data from multiple sources. You may want to compile that data. You may want to produce charts. You may need another person to then review that data and do further analysis and then produce a final outcome. You may then have another team that would trace back that outcome to the original source, for example. So all of that can be done today without agentic AI or even with just simple AI techniques. But what agentic AI is bringing is you can now do this with unstructured data. That's the wow factor. We don't always just deal in numbers. If that was the case, this would be a solved problem years or decades ago. But actually, it's the unstructured data, the text, the audio, the video, you can now incorporate into a process, into a task that you can then join together to make a final product. That's really wow. I've said it
Mm.
easily, but I've said it, yeah, audio, video, text. But actually, most of our data is audio, video, text, as you know, and that
Mm.
means many more processes have now come into the flow. Okay, so what? That's great. That's already an improvement. You're now taking multimodal, as we call it in the jargon, putting it together using agentic AI systems, maybe in a workflow pattern. So in a strict step-by-step process. Actually, what agentic AI is also bringing to the flow, to the fold, is that it does not need to be a step-by-step process. It does not need to be a workflow that can benefit from this technology. And what I mean by that is we can use agentic AI's thinking and reasoning capabilities to actually let the models or let the agentic AI system make the decision on what step to take next. So it could be in a research scenario where our analysts are researching a particular topic. You may not want to describe those steps. You may want the model to decide next steps based on the output. And I think this is the real wow factor that hasn't been thought about before. So now we know really how
Mm.
agentic AI is distinguishing itself from other workflow-based approaches, or in fact, even generative AI approaches, because it's not just about taking those next steps, it's about actioning them using many, many different types of tools, such as connecting to your SharePoint, connecting to a Python environment to execute code, connecting to a particular library to draw charts and graphs, connecting to a third-party system to get that data and execute. So it's really becoming a very, very powerful tool. Now, where is it not that good of a use case? I think that answer is also in my previous comments. Where there is high risk of you getting the exact answer. As we know, generative AI, as the term implies, it generates content based on what it's seen before. That generated content does not always have to be the truth. It
Mm.
can be something that sounds like the truth or is very close to the ground truth, but it isn't. In scenarios where that's important, think about reg reporting, where you're going to a regulator to produce a very specific report with very specific numbers and figures that have to be exact. In that scenario, you need very robust controls in place, governance in place, humans in the loop to ensure that uh, these reports are accurate. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be using generative AI or agentic AI in that space. You just need to have the right governance in place.
Now, when we talk about agentic AI, we're really talking about what's coming in the future. Some of our clients, some of our partners are already trialing, maybe putting into production. But walk us through if you were advising senior management of ABC company or the board, what kind of questions would you be suggesting to them to think about when it comes to putting agentic AI into practice? I think you've told me, Prag, before, you have these 5 magic questions, right? Do you want to share with the audience what they are?
Well, yeah, I think exactly. Everybody today is looking at agentic AI and how to implement it. One
Mm.
thing to note is that the pace of change is so quick that early in the year, if you were having this conversation, Ronit, we'd say, oh, maybe in 6 months' time, we'll be utilizing agentic AI systems. Actually, that's not true. We are utilizing agentic AI systems today, and their capabilities are increasing at a speed, which means they can do more and more things within a short period of time. So I think from a senior perspective, the key things to focus on are one, if you're using agentic AI, are you able to identify agentic AI applications within your organization? Because if you don't identify them robustly, accurately, consistently, then you're unlikely to be able to put the right risk and controls across those. So have a clear definition. think about what that means for your organization. What is agentic AI for your organization? How are you able to identify it? Do you have an inventory that can capture agentic AI systems and associated information? That's step one as you look to develop and deploy this. From a use case perspective, everything looks like an agentic AI use case. And as we were just discussing earlier on, you can use workflows, you can use robotic process automation, you can use many other technologies to fulfill the needs of a particular use case. So you need to be sure that the agentic AI approach is the right approach for the use case at hand. That also makes sense, obviously. But I mean, nowadays there is such a focus on agentic AI or generative AI that you need to make sure that the use case is the right one. Also, it's not about flashy use cases, it's about the right use case. Potentially starting with maybe low risk use cases to test out the technology and then work your way towards more high risk use cases. So many of the use cases today are about efficiency gains, and agentic AI is supercharging that concept of efficiency gains and hyper personalization, which means doing something better and faster specifically for the use case at hand. And that use case could even be for a particular person within a group as opposed to a particular organization or a particular department. That's how much leeway you now have with these kind of tools. So use case again is becoming a key focus area, and it's slightly different from generative AI because use cases now are not tasks, they are end-to-end processes, and you will need to deploy this technology in multiple different ways within a process to get the best results. So I think as a senior leader, you should be asking, is this the right approach? And is this the only approach? And I need to combine this with other approaches, such as what we mentioned, traditional AI approaches potentially, or RPA type tools, or other audio video tools, and look to combine that with our existing tool set that we have. So that's a key consideration for without the right use case, we're in trouble. I think that's the bit the senior management should be asking. And then, of course, governance and risk. You're not going to go far in a highly regulated environment without the right ownership. Who is ultimately responsible for the deployment of the use cases? Do we have the right governance and control mechanisms in place? And I think many organizations are taking their current processes and expanding them to include agentic AI processes as well, which has worked really well for us and which will work really well for many other organizations. Even if you're not a highly regulated industry, you should still be conscious of the agentic AI governance and related risks. And you should be conscious because it can have an adverse effect without you really getting to know it at a later stage. So I think that's another very key focus area from our perspective. So we've talked about use cases, we've talked about, defining the technology clearly and having an inventory of it. We have talked about governance and risk related activities. And finally, third-party vendors, whom should you be working along with, whether you should be building or buying the underlying large language models or small language models. What is that mix of resources, technologies, third-party vendors or otherwise? And then also finally, the technology stack, the architectural components, the hardware, the software, all of that stuff also needs to be considered. So this is a nice holistic view.
Let's come back to the technology and infrastructure and data piece in a second and dive into that more. But let's start with the topic that I think all leaders and all of us have top of mind. How will agentic AI impact people? How will it affect the workforce? If I'm a leader, how am I thinking about training upskilling my employees, or maybe reskilling my employees? And if I'm an employee and we're looking to carry on working rather than retire to the beach together, Prag, what do we need to, not you're obviously helping run our AI Center of Excellence, but the rest of us, what do we need to do to stay employable, relevant, and all those good things in the future?
Yeah, I think whenever we talk about, the impact of this technology on people, I always find it to be overhyped and not in the right way. I think there's this discussion around, will AI take over our jobs? There's discussion around will we all be sitting on a beach because it is going to get too good? I think the future is not going to be like that at all. For us, it is about upskilling our employees to use this technology. Ultimately, it is a tool. It is a very sophisticated tool, and this tool continues to increase what it can do well. Even so, we need humans in the loop. We need skilled people who have a deep knowledge of their processes, of their technology, of their business, to combine that with generative AI. So the idea is this is a symbiotic relationship where we should expect generative AI to be doing more of the heavy lifting, but humans are required to clearly supplement that know-how, review it, and then produce results. But I think the follow-on question, Ronit, there could be, does that mean you need less humans? Or you need more humans? Really, that's really what the question is. But that's a different question in the sense that depends on the people, depends on the organization, and how you implement it.
Sure. Before we
Yeah,
get on to the question of quantum or the number of people doing a
yes,
particular role and task, can I just go back to my previous question and make you sort of drill further in?
yes,
If I'm in the workforce today, I'm in my 20s, 30s, 40s, or even dare I say in my 50s.
yes.
What what should we be as an employee or as a manager of that employee? What are we thinking about in terms of skills? Is it listening to this podcast, spending time hanging out with you, reading your blogs? I don't know. How do we
Yes,
going to your lectures in Dublin? How do we
yes.
stay on top of all of this?
Yeah. In one
Obviously,
sense,
reading our
nothing is
GPS reports.
correct. I think I would start by saying read Ronit's GPS reports. But the point is, we should always stay up to date on technologies anyway. I
Mm,
think people in the industry or otherwise that are always interested in innovation and new technologies, we need to
mm,
up to speed with this. Agentic AI is again accelerating that trend as well. So while I'm immersed in this space, I have to read new papers that come out on a daily basis to be interested. So what should individuals be doing? Look, the first thing is this is not a passing phase that you can sit out, relax. I think it's the hype is gonna die, and you'll be back to the way you were working before. I think that is unlikely to be the case. What is more likely is that you will have to get used to using this technology, and the differentiator is how well you use this technology. To do that, I would highly recommend staying in touch by reading things like the GPS reports or other deep dives that really go behind the scenes to tell you what's happening in the industry, what's happening with the technology, what's happening with the use cases. So be familiar with it. And then the way to distinguish yourself is you have lots of know-how that just doesn't vanish because we now have a large language model. What you've learned over time and your expertise is now even more valuable. It's that combination of what you know from your work experience or life experience that you can use for your day job when working with a large language model that is going to distinguish yourself. So one, read up on as many things as you like, and you don't need to be a technologist for this at all. Do not think you should be writing Python code, and if you don't know how to write Python code, you're out of the loop. That is not the case. Get stuck in, read from your perspective, from a risk perspective. There are numerous opportunities to know how to mitigate risk. Controls, governance is a very hot topic, especially in the business circles, and there's a lot of know-how to be gained from that. Finally, in the development perspective, there's a lot going on. So pick the topic you like, get stuck in, and keep up to speed. That's one thing. The second thing is use this technology both at home and in the work. Take every opportunity to get hands-on with the technology. By that I mean, if you're a developer, get stuck into development. But if you're an end user, use these large language models for your use case, because that is the only way you're going to find out what it actually cannot do. And the key here is find out what the limits of this technology are so you can exploit it to the max. I think that would be good advice and one I follow myself.
Now let's switch gears a little bit. We've talked about this topic from the perspective of ourselves as employees or managers. Let's talk about it from the point of view of the client and the product. How does agentic AI in particular, you could maybe more put in the context of broader AI, how does this change products? So in financial services or related areas, what new capabilities, what new features are going to come around for clients? How does the life of a client change because of agentic AI?
Yeah, I think our clients are very interested in using these technologies themselves, so they often come to us to find out how we are using it. So hands-on experience again is key as a first step to really changing your own life yourself, or changing, or working with your industry partners to get the most out of this technology. But today, the focus very much is it's a fast evolving field. There are lots of risks. We don't know what all those risks are, so we want to be careful in how we can offer this to our clients or how we can advise our clients on using this technology. So like we were briefly saying first, right now we're very much interested in seeing what the benefits of this technology are from efficiency perspective. Can we make the lives of our clients more efficient by doing certain processes that may have taken longer? To do them in a shorter period of time. That's really the first thing, and that's how everyone is looking at this. The second phase quickly then matures into with agentic AI is what can we offer to clients that they can directly interact with the underlying data, processes, services, when we're confident that the risks associated with technology has been mitigated, and when we know what's happening under the hood, when we can work with our second line of defense and so on to get all the right controls in place. So I think that's where this mix is. As the technology evolves, there are going to be more and more use cases. Some of those use cases are going to focus on self-service, self-help, hyper-personalization. Again, the term meaning that we will be able to develop products and services that meet the requirements of an individual or a group of individuals. So that's where this technology is going, and that's where we see we'll continue to expand using specifically agentic AI, which has opened up even more than the generative AI use cases that we have been looking at.
So agentic AI hopefully be all about making our clients' lives simpler and easier and more efficient, taking the friction away from their lives. And particularly when it comes to financial services, most of our clients and most of us don't want to spend huge amounts of time filling out forms, redoing KYC, looking at product renewals. And if agentic AI can make some of those workflows simpler, that should
I think this
hopefully
is
make
it.
client satisfaction.
This is the promise. I think the promise
That's
is
the promise.
exactly what you point out. The promise
Yeah.
is simplification, efficiency gains, potentially, and then hyper personalization. I think those 3 or 4 terms capture at a very high level
Yeah.
what we hope to get.
And delivering the promise, obviously, and this is the hard bit, requires a lot of changes around or augmentation and building on technology, infrastructure, and particularly for us as FIs, data and data strategy. So let's kind of put all of that together and discuss that. What are the changes in whether it's technology stacks, whether it's technology governance, data strategy that we need as large organizations that have been around, in our case, for a couple of centuries, to deliver on that promise of a simpler, faster, better life for our clients?
Yeah, I think this is one of those unique technologies that affect every part of the business simultaneously. So if you look at a large organization ourselves, and we've discussed most of this, there's the 5 pieces around people, which we need to upskill, okay, and we need to make sure they can use this technology. We have processes that we need to review and align with agentic AI use cases, people, process, technology, infrastructure, governance, and finally data. So these verticals continue to be simultaneously impacted by this technology. And I think we have to focus on each one of them and integrate them across the board so that we can get the results that we want from this technology. But yes, fundamental changes to the processes. It's not about doing business as usual and trying to slot in the capabilities of this technology. The successful organizations are those that will look at the capabilities of the technology and look to put their processes around that. So we're flipping this narrative somewhat from processes first and what technologies can support to a phase where these technologies are getting so good that we want to see how we can slot our processes to get the most out of this technology.
Now, looking ahead, Prag, you talked about how agentic AI and AI and emerging technologies in general are moving at the speed of light. Just moving really fast. When we were working on the report with your help in December, January, the GPS and agentic AI, we were probably thinking 2025, even maybe 2026 is proof of concept science project land, and maybe we land this in 2027, 28, and yet you're seeing, I'm seeing enterprise size companies, enterprise clients putting this into practice already in Q1, Q2, 2025. What's the timeline if you had to think about the sort of realistic timeline of adoption of agentic AI across the economy, across the business sector? When should we start seeing, this is becoming a real thing rather than just a experiment here and a proof of concept there?
Yeah, no, I think this year already experiments have begun on
Mm,
agentic AI systems, including ourselves. We want to make sure that we align our governance and risk functions to take the
mm,
most out of this technology. That's the factor that will maybe slow the adoption down from today to maybe a month or
mm,
2 months from now, as we build those things out robustly, extend our existing risk and control frameworks to ensure that we have mitigated all the risk related
mm.
to agentic AI. But yes, by the end of this year, we should have agentic AI systems. It depends what we are imagining when we talk about this, Ronit. We
Sure.
started the conversation with what is the definition,
Yeah.
and many people will walk away with very different concepts of what agentic AI is.
Yeah.
Today, if you have a large language model that connects to a tool, such as a Python environment to execute some code,
Mm,
or write some SQL code to get data out of your database. That's actually agentic AI in one sense. That's happening today. But actually, what we're thinking when we talk about this is multiple large language models, say 10, 20 large language models, all working together to produce end results, connecting to tens of different data sets, producing outputs that are reviewed by several different humans, and an end finished product that today might take months. We're imagining that a click of a button might do that. That's sometime that still has a way to go. But different flavors of agentic AI, one or a few models working with a few tools, are very much a reality today. It's about that complexity in this. How much autonomy is a word we haven't used yet. How much autonomy we should be giving to these agentic
mm.
AI models? How much can we let them run free? What oversight is needed? That's still a little bit down the line, but that doesn't mean you can get the benefits of this technology today with simpler models, systems, connectivity, with tools. And that's exactly what we're doing.
So before we wrap up, Prag, one last focus on misconceptions, or as you said, people often have very different ideas of what AI and agentic AI actually means. In your conversations with colleagues or with the external world out there, what's the biggest misconception people in the business world or the banking world have about agentic AI? What are they getting probably the most wrong?
Yeah. Well, I think the most one thing we need to be careful of is it's not, a solution for every problem that you
Mm,
have in your organization. It is a
mm,
solution for some problems. There are
yeah.
many other things that need to be fixed to get the most out of this technology. It is
Mm,
not that this technology will fix those problems so that you can move on. I think this is
yeah.
a concept we need to understand. As an example, you need to make sure you have good quality data
Mm,
that you can ensure that your large language models have access to. The large
yeah.
language models are unlikely to produce good quality data for you to use unless you have, specially trained them
Yeah.
to do something like that. But the idea is if you provide contradictory data to a large
Mm,
language model, it is unlikely to resolve that for you
mm,
without you providing enough background information. So I think the key thing people are getting wrong is a jack of all trades. This is going to solve problems
yeah.
and that I haven't been able to solve before.
Yeah.
That's not quite the way to look at it.
Yep. Data. It's a bit like focusing on diet when you're trying to, keep your weight under control. Just talking about
Yes.
myself here, Brad, not you.
Yes.
Now, just sort of wrapping up, where can the audience learn more about this topic? Do they follow you on LinkedIn, listen to your lectures in Dublin? Are there certain podcasts, obviously this podcast, our GPS series? What's the best way
Yes.
to stay on top of this very fast moving area?
And you can certainly follow me on LinkedIn. I post material there, no problem. But I think, like you mentioned, without being
Mm,
biased, I think the Citi GPS reports are a great starting point. They go into real detail on some of the
hmm.
topics that are of interest. But there are other publications from others
Sure.
as well that people might be interested in. Instead of telling them exactly what to read, what I should say is keep reading, and
Keep
more
reading.
importantly, keep doing. I
Keep
think
doing.
this is the bit
Absolutely.
that this is where that gap will emerge
Mm,
between people who are interested and people who are interested and are, getting
mm.
stuck in. So, and I finished previous podcasts like this. We should really finish by saying, get stuck in.
Get stuck in. Just do it. Keep playing. Stay curious. Dr. Prag
Yes.
Sharma, it's always a pleasure to chat to you. Thank you so much for joining us on the Citi Institute Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
The speaker's views are their own and may not necessarily reflect the views of Citi or any of its affiliates. All opinions are subject to change without notice. Neither the information provided nor any opinion expressed constitutes a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security. The expressions of opinion are not intended to be a forecast of future events or a guarantee of future results.